Deep in the Montana wilderness, where cell towers don't reach and the nearest neighbor is 50 miles away, sits a rotting log cabin that locals refuse to discuss. Sarah Spike Morrison stands on its sagging porch, 8 months pregnant, her Hell Angels leather jacket stretched tight over her growing belly. The cabin's previous owner vanished 3 years ago under mysterious circumstances, but Sarah doesn't care about ghost stories. She needs somewhere to hide. The wooden steps groan under her weight as she shifts position, fishing the rusty key from her jacket pocket. She'd bought this place sight unseen through a cash deal with a nervous real estate agent who insisted on meeting her 3 towns over. No paperwork trail, no questions asked. Exactly what she needed. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if protesting their new accommodations, and Sarah placed a protective hand over her stomach. "I know, little one," she whispered. "It's not the Ritz, but it's ours." The door opens with surprising ease, hinges groaning like wounded animals. Musty air hits her face, thick with the smell of decay and something else she can't identify. Dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight streaming through grimy windows, and Sarah notices the furniture is still in place. A faded plaid couch, a wooden dining table with one broken leg propped up by phone books, shelves lined with mason jars and old paperbacks. A stolen pickup truck sits in the clearing behind her, loaded with everything she owns, a duffel bag of clothes, medical supplies for the birth, and most importantly, the waterproof case hidden beneath spare blankets. Inside that case are photographs, financial records, and USB drives containing enough evidence to destroy Marcus Iron Wolf Rodriguez and his entire operation. 3 states' worth of drug routes, money laundering schemes, and bodies buried in shallow graves. Sarah steps inside, her boots echoing on the warped floorboards. The sound is wrong somehow, hollow in places where it should be solid. She bounces on her heels experimentally and notices several boards flex more than they should. Dark stains mark the wood beneath her feet, seeping between the planks in patterns that make her stomach turn. A stack of newspapers sits on the kitchen counter, yellowed with age. The top headline reads, "Local woman still missing after 2 weeks." Sarah picks it up, squinting at the date. July 15th, 3 years ago. The missing woman's photo shows a blonde in her 30s with a bright smile. Below that paper, another headline, "Second woman vanishes from Glacier County." Then another, "Police investigate pattern of disappearances." Her hands shake as she flips through them. 5 women total, all between ages 25 and 40, all missing within a 6-month period before the newspapers stop. The dates coincide perfectly with when the cabin's owner disappeared. Sarah backs away from the counter, her heart racing. The baby responds to her stress with violent kicks, and she doubles over, gripping the table for support. She needs to think rationally. Lots of rural properties have dark histories. People disappear in the wilderness all the time. Bears, accidents, getting lost. It doesn't mean anything. But her instincts, honed by years of surviving in the violent world of motorcycle clubs, scream danger. She forces herself to explore the rest of the cabin. The single bedroom contains a mattress with suspicious dark stains and rope marks on the metal bed frame. Duct tape residue clings to the headboard. In the closet, she finds women's clothing in various sizes, hanging like ghosts of their former owners. The bathroom mirror reflects her pale face and wild eyes. Sarah splashes cold water from the tap, surprised it still works. When she looks up, she notices scratches in the mirror's surface, not random damage, but deliberate marks. Letters carved with something sharp. "Help me." Sarah's phone shows no signal, as expected. Her nearest neighbor might as well be on another planet. She's completely alone with whatever secrets this cabin holds. But she's also exhausted, 9 months pregnant, and has nowhere else to run. Marcus and the Iron Wolves are hunting her across 3 states. Every hotel, every safe house, every friend she might turn to, they've got eyes everywhere. This cabin might be haunted by the ghosts of murdered women, but at least those ghosts can't hurt her baby. She unloads her truck as the sun begins to set, moving slowly to conserve energy. Each trip past the welded basement door makes her skin crawl, but she pushes forward. She's survived worse than ghost stories. As darkness falls over the Montana wilderness, Sarah Morrison prepares to spend her first night in what might be either her sanctuary or her tomb. The cabin's silence pressed against Maya's eardrums like water. She stood in the doorway, one hand instinctively covering her belly while the other gripped the rusted door handle. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through grimy windows, and the floorboards beneath her boots groaned a warning with each tentative step inside. The main room stretched before her, sparse but functional. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth blackened by countless fires, mismatched furniture. A threadbare couch, a wooden table scarred with knife marks, two chairs that had seen better decades, occupied the space like forgotten soldiers. Everything wore a coat of neglect, but nothing appeared broken beyond repair. Maya's trained eye catalogued potential threats and advantages. The windows offered clear sight lines in three directions. The back door provided an escape route. The walls looked solid enough to stop small-caliber rounds. Old habits died hard, even when you were trying to bury them in the Montana wilderness. She moved deeper into the cabin, her motorcycle boots echoing in the stillness. The kitchen consisted of a hand pump over a basin, open shelving, and a wood-burning stove that had probably been installed when Roosevelt was president. The first Roosevelt, but it was clean, functional. Someone had maintained this place, at least until recently. The baby kicked, a flutter like wings against her ribs. Maya paused, pressing both hands to her stomach. 4 months along, and already the kid was restless. Just like his father had been, just like she was. Don't think about Razor, not now. A narrow hallway led to 2 bedrooms. The first contained only a metal bed frame and a dresser with stuck drawers. The second was larger, with a window facing the tree line and built-in shelves that could hold baby things. Maya found herself mentally arranging a crib in the corner before catching herself. Planning ahead was dangerous. It meant hope, and hope could get you killed. She returned to the main room and noticed what she'd missed before, recent signs of habitation. A coffee mug on the mantel, still stained brown inside. A flannel shirt draped over one chair, a newspaper dated 3 weeks ago folded beside the couch. Someone had been living here, and recently. The hairs on her neck prickled. Maya drew the .38 from her waistband, checking the cylinder out of habit. 5 rounds. She'd need to find more ammunition soon, along with food, medical supplies, and about 1,000 other things necessary for survival off the grid. Outside, her Harley sat like a mechanical predator, chrome catching the sunlight. She'd ridden it hard from Billings, pushing through mountain passes and backwoods roads that would challenge most riders. But Maya wasn't most riders. She'd learned to handle a bike before she could legally drive a car, back when her father still thought his little girl might follow in his footsteps, before she'd exceeded his wildest expectations in all the wrong ways. The Hells Angels patch was still sewn to her leather jacket, draped across the bike's seat. She should burn it, cut all ties to the life she was fleeing. But the patch represented 12 years of blood, brotherhood, and a kind of loyalty most people would never understand. Even now, even after everything, abandoning it felt like sacrilege. Maya holstered the pistol and began unloading her meager possessions. 2 changes of clothes, basic toiletries, a first aid kit, and $300 in crumpled bills, everything she owned that mattered. She'd left behind the apartment in Oakland, the custom bike Razor had built for her, and a reputation that could open doors or end lives depending on the circumstances. She carried her duffel bag inside. A sound made her freeze, tires on gravel approaching slowly. Maya dropped the bag and drew her weapon in one fluid motion, positioning herself beside the front window where she could observe without being seen. A battered pickup truck rounded the bend, moving at the cautious pace of someone familiar with the terrain. Behind the wheel sat an older man wearing a John Deere cap and several days' worth of grey stubble. He didn't look like law enforcement or club muscle, but appearances meant nothing in Maya's world. The truck stopped beside her Harley. The man climbed out slowly, hands visible, and studied the motorcycle with the appreciation of someone who understood machinery. Then his gaze moved to the cabin, and Maya saw him notice the open door. "Anyone home?" he called out, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone accustomed to being answered. "Saw the bike. Know you're in there." Maya weighed her options. Running would mean abandoning the first real shelter she'd found. Fighting an unknown quantity could endanger the baby. Sometimes the most dangerous choice was also the only viable one. She stepped into the doorway, gun held low but ready. "That depends on who's asking." The man's eyes flicked to her weapon, then to her face, then lingered briefly on her stomach. When he smiled, it transformed his weathered features completely. "Name's Frank, and I reckon you're sitting in my cabin." The cabin's silence pressed against Maya's eardrums like water. She'd been awake for 20 minutes, watching dust motes dance in the amber morning light that leaked through gaps in the boarded windows. Her hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly, feeling the rhythmic flutter that had become her compass through the chaos of recent weeks. She'd slept better than she had in months, despite the lumpy mattress and the way the old bed frame creaked with every movement. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the first time in years she'd fallen asleep without checking locks twice and keeping her knife within arm's reach. The floorboards groaned under her feet as she padded to the kitchen. Morning revealed details she'd missed in yesterday's fading light. Someone had lived here recently enough to leave behind half a bag of coffee beans and a manual grinder. The refrigerator hummed quietly, powered by what she assumed was a generator somewhere outside. Maya worked the coffee grinder's handle, the mechanical rhythm soothing. The rich aroma filled the small space, masking the cabin's underlying scent of pine sap and something else she couldn't quite identify, something medicinal, sharp. Through the kitchen window, she caught her first clear view of the surrounding forest. Towering pines stretched endlessly in every direction, their canopy so thick it created a perpetual twilight at ground level. No roads visible, no power lines, no neighbors. It was exactly what she needed. The coffee maker gurgled to life, and Maya allowed herself a moment to imagine mornings like this stretching into the future. Her child's laughter echoing through these rooms, teaching small hands to work the coffee grinder, building snowmen in the clearing come winter. The fantasy shattered when she opened a kitchen drawer looking for a spoon. Syringes, dozens of them, still in sterile packaging. Beneath them, rubber tubing and small glass vials filled with clear liquid. Her blood turned to ice water as recognition hit. She'd seen enough drug deals go sideways to know a serious operation when she saw one. Maya slammed the drawer shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. She yanked open the next drawer. More medical supplies, gauze, surgical tape, bottles of pills with labels she couldn't read. The third drawer revealed something worse, photographs. Her hands trembled as she lifted the stack of pictures. Men and women, all unconscious or barely conscious, lying on what looked like a medical table. Their faces were slack, eyes rolled back or closed. Some had IV lines running into their arms. Others showed surgical scars, fresh and angry red. The last photo made her stomach lurch. A young woman, maybe 20, with Maya's own dark hair and olive skin. The girl's eyes stared sightlessly at the camera, her lips blue-tinged. A toe tag was visible at the bottom of the frame. Maya dropped the photos like they were on fire, backing away from the counter. The coffee maker's cheerful bubbling now sounded obscene in the silence. She pressed her back against the wall, trying to process what she'd found. This wasn't some abandoned hunting cabin. Someone had been using this place for something terrible, something that involved drugs and medical equipment and people who might not have survived whatever was done to them. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly again. She had to leave, now. Whatever refuge she'd thought she'd found was built on something rotten. But as she turned toward the door, the sound of an engine cut through the morning quiet. Maya froze, her blood turning to slush. The sound grew closer, the rumble of what sounded like a heavy truck navigating the rough mountain road. She rushed to the living room window and peered through a gap in the boards. A black SUV bounced into the clearing, its windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever was inside. It came to a stop next to her motorcycle, and Maya's heart sank as she realized how exposed her bike was. There was no way to hide that someone was here. The SUV's engine died. 2 car doors slammed shut. Maya's mind raced through options. The back door. Could she slip out without being seen? But they'd still find her bike, and she'd be on foot in the wilderness while pregnant. The forest was vast, but these people clearly knew the area better than she did. Heavy footsteps approached the front porch. Maya pressed herself against the wall beside the door, trying to control her breathing. Her hand found the handle of the knife at her belt, muscle memory from years of living on the knife's edge. A key turned in the lock. Maya's blood froze. They had a key. This was their place, and she'd walked right into it like a lamb to slaughter. The door creaked open, and a man's voice drifted through the gap. "Well, well, looks like we've got ourselves a visitor." The sound of boots on gravel made Maya's blood freeze. She pressed herself against the kitchen window, peering through a gap in the moth-eaten curtains. A black SUV sat in her makeshift driveway, its engine still ticking as it cooled. The license plate was obscured by mud, but she could make out 2 figures moving toward the cabin's front door. Her hand instinctively went to her belly, feeling the slight swell beneath her oversized flannel shirt. 3 months along, and already this baby had seen more danger than most kids would in a lifetime. She'd promised herself things would be different once they reached Montana, once they found sanctuary in this forgotten corner of the wilderness. The knock came hard and deliberate, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the small space. Maya's mind raced through her options. The back door led to dense forest, but the terrain was treacherous and she couldn't risk a fall. The root cellar she'd discovered yesterday might work, but getting there meant crossing the main room. "Miss Chen?" The voice was male, professional, with just enough authority to make her skin crawl. "We'd like to speak with you." She hadn't used that name in weeks. The fake ID buried in her backpack bore a different surname entirely, one she'd paid dearly for in a truck stop bathroom outside Billings. Someone had tracked her here, which meant someone knew exactly who she was and what she was running from. Moving carefully on the balls of her feet, Maya crept toward the bedroom where she'd stashed her emergency bag. The floorboards groaned under her weight, each sound amplified in the oppressive silence. Through the thin walls, she could hear muffled conversation, though the words were indistinct. Her fingers found the bag's zipper and carefully pulled it open. Inside, wrapped in an old T-shirt, lay the .38 special she'd lifted from Tommy's apartment the night she ran. She'd hoped never to touch it again, had promised her unborn child that violence was behind them, but promises meant nothing when survival was at stake. The knock came again, more insistent this time. "We know you're in there, Maya. We just want to talk." That was what they always said. Just talk, just questions, just come with us for a minute. She'd seen enough of the club's business to know how these conversations ended. Blood on concrete, shallow graves in the desert, families who never got answers about where their daughters had gone. A new sound made her pulse spike, the metallic scrape of someone testing the door handle. She'd secured it with a chain and deadbolt, but the hardware looked older than disco and twice as reliable. The whole cabin felt like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard. Maya chambered around as quietly as possible, the soft click seeming loud as thunder in her ears. Through the bedroom window, she could see forest stretching for miles in every direction. Somewhere out there was the hiking trail that had led her to this place, the same path that would take her deeper into the mountains if she could reach it. The front door rattled in its frame. They were getting impatient. She slung the bag over her shoulder and moved toward the window, grateful that whoever had lived here before hadn't believed in screens. The opening was narrow but manageable. What concerned her was the drop, maybe 6 feet to the rocky ground below. Not fatal, but enough to twist an ankle or worse. Voices drifted around the cabin's exterior now. They were circling the building, cutting off escape routes. Professional work. These weren't club soldiers sent to drag her back to California. This had the feel of something bigger, more organized. Maya thought about the strange items she'd found hidden throughout the cabin. The radio equipment, the cash, the documents written in languages she couldn't identify. She'd assumed the previous occupant was just another runaway seeking isolation. But what if this place had already been on someone's radar? What if she'd stumbled into something that had nothing to do with her past and everything to do with someone else's secrets? The sound of splintering wood told her that thinking time was over. Maya hoisted herself onto the windowsill, legs dangling over the edge. The baby seemed to flutter inside her, as if sensing the danger. She'd made so many promises to this child already: safety, stability, a normal life free from the chaos that had defined her own existence. One more promise, then, whispered into the Montana wind as she prepared to drop into the unknown. Whatever happened next, whoever these people were and whatever they wanted, she would not go quietly. She would not disappear into the statistics of missing persons and cold case files. The front door gave way with a crash that sent birds exploding from nearby trees. Maya let go of the windowsill and fell into the gathering dusk, her feet hitting earth just as voices filled the cabin behind her. The hunt had begun. The generator's hum died with a mechanical wheeze, plunging the cabin into sudden silence. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her belly as darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the orange glow seeping through the wood stove's grate. The space heater clicked once, twice, then fell silent. Shit! She fumbled for the flashlight on the kitchen counter, its beam cutting through the gloom. The fuel gauge on the generator read empty, though she could have sworn there was enough gas to last through the night. Either the gauge was broken, or she'd miscalculated how much power the space heater would draw. The temperature was already dropping. February in Montana didn't forgive mistakes. Maya pulled on her jacket and boots, grabbed the empty gas can, and stepped into the night. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing her breath. Snow crunched under her feet as she made her way to the truck, flashlight beam dancing across the white landscape. The nearest gas station was 40 minutes away, if the roads were clear. She was halfway to the truck when she heard it, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines. Maya's blood turned to ice water. She killed the flashlight and pressed herself against the side of the cabin, listening. The sound grew closer, multiple bikes moving through the forest. No one rode motorcycles through these mountains in February unless they had a very good reason. Unless they were looking for someone. The engines cut out somewhere down the mountain, close enough that she could hear voices carried on the wind. Male voices, rough and familiar. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she crept to the corner of the cabin and peered down the slope. 3 headlights pierced the darkness, moving slowly up the access road. They'd found her truck's tire tracks in the snow. Maya ran back inside, her mind racing. The .38 was loaded, but 3 men against 1 pregnant woman weren't good odds. The cabin had a back door, but running into the wilderness in February would be suicide. She needed another option. The voices were getting closer. She could make out words now. Tracks lead right up here, Diesel. She's got to be close. Truck's warm. Maya's hands shook as she checked the revolver's cylinder. 6 shots. She'd have to make them count. The footsteps stopped at her front door. Maya! The voice that called out made her stomach lurch. Tommy Diesel Morrison, Razor's lieutenant and the meanest son of a bitch in the chapter. We know you're in there, sweetheart. Come on out and let's talk. She pressed her back against the wall beside the door, gun raised. Go away, Tommy. I'm done with all that. Nah, it ain't friendly. We've come a long way to see you. His tone was casual, conversational. She knew that tone. It meant he was planning something violent. Razor's real upset about you leaving without saying goodbye. Tell Razor he can go to hell. Tommy laughed, but there was no humor in it. See, that's the problem. Razor don't take kindly to disrespect, especially from his woman. I'm not his woman anymore. That baby you're carrying says different. Maya's blood chilled. They knew about the pregnancy, which meant they'd been watching her longer than she'd realized. The way Razor sees it, Tommy continued, you're carrying club property. and nobody steals from the Hell Angels. She heard them moving, spreading out around the cabin. Boots crunched in the snow, circling her position. They weren't going to talk their way in. They were setting up for an assault. Maya moved away from the door, deeper into the cabin. In the wood stove's glow, she spotted something she'd missed before. A trapdoor in the floor near the back wall, partially hidden under a braided rug. She pulled the rug aside and lifted the heavy wooden panel. A ladder led down into darkness. Cold air drifted up from below, carrying the scent of earth and something else, something metallic. The front door exploded inward with a crash of splintering wood. "Tommy's coming, Maya." Diesel's voice filled the cabin as Boots thundered across the threshold. "You can't run from family." Maya dropped through the trapdoor, pulling it closed above her head just as flashlight beams swept the interior. The ladder was old but solid, leading down into what felt like a root cellar. Her feet touched packed earth, and she fumbled for her own flashlight. The beam revealed a small underground room, maybe 8 feet by 10. Shelves lined the walls, filled with canning jars and preserved goods, but it was what lay in the center of the room that stopped her cold. A skeleton, still wearing the rotted remains of clothes, lay curled on the earthen floor. Beside it, a rusted hunting knife and what looked like restraints attached to metal rings set into the stone walls. Above her head, she heard furniture being overturned, Tommy shouting orders to search every corner. They hadn't found the trap door yet, but they would. Maya stared at the bones, understanding flooding through her like poison. This wasn't just an abandoned cabin. Someone had been held here, died here, and now she was trapped in their tomb. The generator coughed to life on the third pull, filling the cabin with a low mechanical hum that made Raven's shoulders relax for the first time in hours. She'd found it in a shed behind the cabin, along with 2 5-gallon gas cans that were mercifully full. The previous owner had prepared for Montana winters better than most. Warm yellow light flooded the main room as she flipped the switch, revealing details she'd missed in the flashlight's narrow beam. The furniture was sturdy but worn. A leather couch with cracked arms, a wooden dining table scarred by years of use, shelves lined with paperback novels and canning jars. Someone had lived here, really lived here, not just used it as a weekend retreat. But it was the photographs scattered across the mantelpiece that made her stomach clench. A family, mother, father, 2 young children. The images progressed chronologically from left to right, showing the kids growing from toddlers to teenagers. In the final photo, taken in front of this very cabin, they all smiled at the camera with the easy confidence of people who believed their happiness was permanent. Raven touched her belly unconsciously. The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs that felt like a reminder. Whatever had happened to this family, their tragedy had become her salvation. She couldn't afford guilt about occupying their space. A thorough search of the kitchen revealed enough canned goods to last weeks: soup, beans, peaches, tomatoes. The propane tanks for the stove were nearly full. In the bedroom, she found clothes that might fit, flannel shirts and wool sweaters that would swallow her frame but keep her warm. Everything suggested the owners had left in a hurry, planning to return soon. She was examining a first aid kit when she heard the vehicles. The sound drifted through the forest like distant thunder, motorcycle engines, multiple bikes, maybe trucks too. Raven killed the lights and pressed herself against the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. No headlights yet, but the rumble was growing closer, echoing off the mountain walls in a way that made it impossible to determine direction. Her hand moved instinctively to the Glock tucked in her waistband. 3 magazines, 90 rounds total. It wouldn't be enough if Viper had brought the full crew, but it might buy her time to run deeper into the wilderness. Though running in her condition, in this terrain in winter, that was its own death sentence. The engine noise peaked, then began to fade. Passing by, following the main forest road toward some other destination. Raven held her breath until silence returned, broken only by wind through the pines and the generator's steady drone. False alarm. But it drove home how exposed she was. The cabin sat in a small clearing, visible from multiple angles. If someone came looking specifically for her, she'd have maybe 60 seconds warning before they reached the front door. She needed to understand the layout better. Using the flashlight to avoid silhouetting herself in the windows, she explored the cabin's defensive possibilities. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen, main room, all on a single level with too many windows and only 2 exits. The back door opened onto a narrow porch that faced the tree line, maybe 30 yards of open ground before cover. In the larger bedroom's closet, she found something that made her pulse quicken. A gun safe, digital lock, big enough for rifles. She tried obvious combinations, birthdays from the family photos, the address numbers she'd seen on the mailbox, but nothing worked. Still, knowing weapons might be locked inside gave her a goal. She could work on the safe systematically, and if she cracked it, her defensive position would improve dramatically. She made herself eat a can of soup cold, standing at the kitchen counter, forcing down every spoonful despite her churning stomach. The baby needed nutrition, and she needed strength. Outside, snow had begun falling again, fat flakes drifting past the windows like static. Before settling in for the night, she did one final security check. Generator turned off to conserve fuel and reduce noise. Curtains drawn tight. Back door unlocked for quick escape, but a kitchen chair positioned so it would topple if someone entered. Her go-bag packed and ready by the bedroom window. She lay on the musty mattress, fully clothed, Glock within reach, listening to the cabin settle around her. Wood creaking as temperatures dropped, mice scurrying in the walls, normal sounds of an old building in a wild place. But underneath it all, barely audible, she could swear she heard something else, a rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against glass. Probably ice forming on the gutters, probably nothing at all, probably. The generator coughed to life on the 3rd pull, its steady rumble cutting through the mountain silence like a chainsaw through bone. Sarah wiped her hands on her jeans, grateful for the warmth that would soon fill the cabin's main room. 2 weeks of splitting wood and rationing propane had taught her the brutal mathematics of survival. Calories burned versus calories consumed, warmth generated versus heat lost. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the subtle shift of life within. 18 weeks now, maybe 19. Without regular checkups, she could only guess at the timeline. The baby seemed healthy, though, active enough to wake her most nights with persistent kicks to her ribs. The radio crackled from its perch on the kitchen counter, cycling through static and fragments of distant conversations. She'd been monitoring the channels religiously, listening for any chatter about a missing Hells Angels member or searches in the area. So far, nothing. Either Jake had written her off as dead, or he was planning something that didn't require radio coordination. The floorboard in the corner caught her attention again. She'd noticed it yesterday, how it sat slightly higher than the others, how it creaked differently under her weight. Now, with the generator masking any sound she might make, seemed like the perfect time to investigate. The crowbar she'd found in the shed made quick work of the nails. The board lifted with a groan, revealing a space beneath that definitely wasn't standard construction. Someone had deliberately created this hiding spot, lining it with plastic and sealing it carefully against moisture. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a manila envelope thick with documents. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, not from cold but from the instinctive knowledge that she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. The first document was a birth certificate for someone named Michael Chen, dated 35 years ago. Beneath it, a social security card, a passport, and what looked like college transcripts. All bearing the same name, all looking legitimate, but paper-clipped to the passport was a Polaroid photograph of the man she'd found frozen in the woodshed, very much alive, standing in front of this very cabin with a woman and 2 young children. Her blood turned to ice water. The next set of documents belonged to someone called David Rodriguez. Different age, different background, but the same face staring back at her from another Polaroid. This time he was alone, wearing what looked like a federal agent's jacket. There were more. Thomas Wilson, Robert Hayes, James Patterson, each identity complete with documentation, each photograph showing the same man she'd buried beneath 3 feet of frozen earth. The dates on the documents spanned nearly 2 decades. At the bottom of the pile she found newspaper clippings, missing persons reports, a family in Oregon who'd vanished while camping, a federal witness who'd disappeared the night before he was supposed to testify against a drug cartel, a journalist investigating corruption in small-town Montana who'd simply stopped filing stories. Sarah's vision blurred as the implications crashed over her. The cabin's previous owner hadn't been some harmless hermit who died of natural causes. He'd been something much worse, a predator who'd spent years perfecting the art of becoming other people and likely killing them in the process. She thought about the care with which she'd handled his body, the makeshift funeral she'd given him. The man she'd mourned as a fellow lost soul had been a monster. The baby kicked hard, as if sensing her distress. Sarah pressed both hands to her belly, trying to calm her racing heart. Stress wasn't good for either of them, but how could she not be stressed? She was living in a serial killer's house, sleeping in his bed, eating from his plates. Worse yet, she'd been leaving traces of her own presence everywhere. Fingerprints, DNA, evidence of habitation. If the authorities ever connected this place to the missing persons cases, if they ever found the body she'd buried, she would become the prime suspect in crimes that stretched back decades. The radio squawked, pulling her from her spiral of panic. Through the static, she caught fragments of a conversation between what sounded like park rangers. Something about tracks spotted near the fire tower, evidence of someone camping in the backcountry without permits. They were looking for her. Sarah stuffed the documents back into their hiding place and hammered the floorboard down. Her hands shook as she worked, driving the nails crooked in her haste. Outside, the wind was picking up, carrying the scent of snow and the promise of another long, dangerous night. She had to make a choice. Stay and risk capture, or venture into the wilderness with a storm coming and nowhere safe to go. The sound of gravel crunching under tires cut through the morning silence like a blade. Maya's blood turned to ice as she peered through the cabin's front window, watching a black SUV roll to a stop beside her motorcycle. She recognized the vehicle immediately. Club business always traveled in vehicles like that. 2 men stepped out, their leather cuts unmistakable even from a distance. The larger one was Diesel, Tommy's right hand, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks and a face that had seen too many fights. The other was Crow, smaller but meaner, the kind of guy who enjoyed hurting people a little too much. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her belly. 6 months along now, the pregnancy was impossible to hide. She'd been foolish to think she could disappear without consequences. The club didn't let people walk away, especially not with the secrets she carried. She grabbed the .38 from the kitchen counter, checking the cylinder. 4 bullets left, not enough if this went sideways, but it would have to do. The shotgun leaned against the wall near the back door, her escape route if things got ugly fast. "Maya!" Diesel's voice boomed across the clearing. "We know you're in there. Tommy wants to talk." She pressed herself against the wall beside the window, heart hammering. Tommy was supposed to be in county lockup for another 6 months. If he was sending his boys, either he'd made bail or this was bigger than she'd thought. "Come on out, sweetheart," Crow called, his voice carrying that sick sweetness that made her skin crawl. "We ain't here to hurt nobody." Maya almost laughed. Crow had put 3 men in the hospital just last year, and that was on a good day. She'd seen what the club did to people who crossed them, had helped clean up the aftermath more times than she cared to remember. She moved quietly toward the back of the cabin, staying low beneath the windows. The baby kicked, as if sensing her fear. "Stay quiet, little one," she whispered. "Mama's going to get us out of this." The floorboard creaked under her foot, that loose board near the bedroom door she'd been meaning to fix. She froze, but it was too late. "She's moving around in there." Diesel's voice was closer now. "Maya, don't make this harder than it has to be. Tommy just wants to know you and the baby are safe." Safe. The word was a joke coming from them. Tommy's version of keeping her safe had involved broken ribs and bruises hidden under long sleeves. The baby was the only reason she'd finally found the courage to run. She reached the back door and slowly turned the knob. The hinges protested with a soft groan, but she managed to slip outside into the morning air. The forest pressed close against the cabin's rear wall, offering cover if she could reach it. Windows open on the side, Crow's voice drifted around the building. Might have gone out that way. Maya crept along the cabin's back wall, the shotgun heavy in her hands. Branches caught at her hair as she moved toward the tree line. 20 feet to cover. She could make it if she was careful. A twig snapped behind her. Well, well, look what we got here. She spun around to find Crow emerging from the cabin's side, his own weapon drawn. Up close, she could see the spider web tattoo crawling up his neck and the cruel smile playing at his lips. Drop the gun, Maya. You know you ain't gonna shoot nobody. But he was wrong. The old Maya, the one who'd taken Tommy's beatings and kept quiet about club business, she might not have pulled the trigger. This Maya, the one with a life growing inside her and a future to protect, was different. Stay back, Crow. I mean it. Tommy's worried about you, babe. Says you took something that belongs to him. His eyes dropped to her belly. Says he wants his kid back. This baby isn't his. The lie came easily. She'd been telling herself the same thing for months, trying to make it true through sheer force of will. DNA don't lie, sweetheart, and Tommy, he's real particular about what's his. Diesel appeared around the other corner, boxing her in. The forest was still 10 feet away, but it might as well have been 10 miles. Here's how this is gonna go, Diesel said, his voice deceptively calm. You're gonna come back with us, nice and quiet. Tommy's got lawyers now, good ones. He'll be out soon, and when he is, you two are gonna work things out like civilized people. Maya's finger tightened on the trigger. She thought about the cash hidden in the cabin's walls, about the new identity papers she'd been planning to buy, about the life she'd imagined for herself and her child. All of it was slipping away like smoke. What's it gonna be, Maya? Crow took a step closer. Easy way or hard way? The generator coughed to life on the third pull, its mechanical growl echoing through the cabin like a warning. Maya stepped back, wiping grease from her hands with a rag she'd found in the tool shed. The lights flickered once, twice, then held steady, casting harsh shadows across the main room. She'd been working on it for 2 hours, her back aching and her patience wearing thin. But the alternative, another night in darkness with only candles and her racing thoughts, wasn't an option, not when she kept hearing things that might or might not be there. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if protesting the noise. Maya pressed her palm to her belly, feeling the familiar flutter of movement beneath her skin. 7 months now, 7 months of carrying this secret, this promise of something better. I know, little one, she whispered, but we need the power. She moved through the cabin, checking the rooms methodically. The refrigerator hummed back to life, and she made a mental note to drive into town tomorrow for supplies. The space heater in the bedroom clicked on, promising warmth for the night ahead. Everything seemed to be working. It was in the basement that she found the locked door. She'd been down there twice before, both times quickly, just to check the generator's fuel line and electrical connections. But now, with proper lighting, she could see the narrow hallway that extended beyond the main basement room. At its end stood a heavy wooden door with 3 separate deadbolts. Maya approached slowly, her footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The door was solid oak, reinforced with metal brackets. Someone had wanted whatever was behind it to stay put, or to keep something else out. She tested the first lock. Solid. The second and third were equally secure, but as she examined the frame, she noticed something that made her pulse quicken, fresh scratches in the wood around the locks. Someone had been here recently, and they'd had keys. The sound of gravel crunching outside froze her in place. Maya killed the basement light and moved to the small window that looked out at ground level. Through the glass, she could see the beams of 2 flashlights cutting through the darkness. Voices carried on the wind. Low, urgent, definitely male. Her hand instinctively went to the Glock tucked into her waistband. She'd hoped those days were behind her, but muscle memory never fully faded. Moving as quietly as her pregnant body would allow, she made her way back upstairs. The cabin's main level was bright now, every window glowing like a beacon. Stupid. She'd been so focused on getting the power working that she hadn't considered how visible it would make her. Maya quickly moved through the rooms, switching off lights until only the kitchen remained illuminated. Through the front window, she could see them now, two men in heavy coats approaching the porch with the confidence of people who belonged here. One was tall and lean, the other shorter but broader through the shoulders. Both moved with the easy coordination of partners who'd worked together before. The tall one gestured toward the cabin, saying something she couldn't hear. The shorter man nodded and split off, heading around toward the back of the building. Maya's mouth went dry. They were flanking her. She eased away from the window and considered her options. The front door had a decent deadbolt, but the back door was older, weaker. If they really wanted in, they'd make it happen. The question was whether they were here for the cabin, for whatever was behind that locked door in the basement, or for her. Given her luck lately, probably both. The knock on the front door was polite, almost casual. 3 measured raps followed by a pause. "Hello?" The voice was friendly, concerned. "We saw the lights come on. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay." Maya stayed silent, counting her breaths. The baby seemed to sense her tension, moving restlessly. Another knock, less polite this time. "We know someone's in there. Your truck's outside." She closed her eyes, cursing herself for not hiding the vehicle. But where? The trees were too thick to drive between, and the road only went one direction. "Look, we're not here to cause trouble," the voice continued. "We just need to get something we left behind. 5 minutes, and we're gone." The locked door in the basement. It had to be. Maya weighed her choices. She could try to wait them out, hope they'd give up and leave. She could try to negotiate, let them get whatever they came for in exchange for being left alone. Or she could fight. The sound of splintering wood from the back of the cabin made the decision for her. They weren't here to talk. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind still howled through the gaps in the cabin's weathered logs. Maya pressed her back against the wall beside the window, peering through a crack in the boards she'd nailed up yesterday. The footprints circling the cabin were fresh, made sometime during the night while she'd slept fitfully with the shotgun across her lap. 3 sets of prints, maybe 4. The snow made it hard to tell where one ended and another began, but she could make out boot treads distinct from her own worn sneakers. They'd been watching, planning, waiting for the right moment. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby kicked restlessly as if sensing her fear. 6 months along now, and every day brought new limitations to what her body could do. Running wasn't an option anymore, not through deep snow and rough terrain. Fighting would be harder too. Her center of gravity shifted, her reflexes slower. The radio crackled from its perch on the mantel, startling her. Static filled the room before a voice broke through, distorted but unmistakably familiar. "Maya, honey, I know you're in there." Her blood turned to ice. Tank's voice, gravelly from years of cigarettes and shouting over motorcycle engines, drifted through the speaker like smoke under a door. She'd been running from the Hell Angels for 3 months, but somehow they'd found her in this god-forsaken wilderness. "We just want to talk, sweetheart. You took something that belongs to us, and we'd like it back." Maya's free hand went to the duffel bag hidden beneath the loose floorboard near the fireplace. The money she'd stolen from the club's safe was her insurance policy, her ticket to a new life for her and the baby. She'd earned every dollar of it dealing with the club's nastier business while Tank and his lieutenants got their hands dirty in other ways. The radio hissed again. "We know about the baby, Maya, our baby. You can't just disappear with family." Family. The word made her stomach lurch. The Hell Angels had never been family, no matter what they claimed. Family didn't force teenage girls into prostitution. Family didn't beat women unconscious for asking too many questions. Family didn't threaten to cut a baby from its mother's womb if she tried to leave. A shadow moved past the boarded window, quick and purposeful. They were positioning themselves around the cabin, cutting off escape routes. Maya had studied the property during her weeks here, noting every tree, every rock formation, every possible path through the wilderness. But in deep snow, with armed men hunting her, those escape routes felt as distant as the moon. She checked the shotgun's chamber, then grabbed the box of shells from the shelf. The cabin's previous occupants had left behind more than just furniture and photographs. Hidden in a false bottom drawer, she'd found a small arsenal, hunting rifles, handguns, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. She'd wondered then what kind of people had lived here, what they'd been hiding from. Now she was grateful for their paranoia. The floorboards creaked somewhere near the back of the cabin. Someone was on the porch, testing their weight against the barricaded door. Maya had pushed the heavy oak table against it, then wedged chairs underneath the handle, but determined men with the right tools could get through eventually. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, Maya." Tank's voice came from right outside now, no longer filtered through the radio. "We've got nowhere to be. We can wait all day, all week if we need to. But that baby's got to eat, and you're looking a little thin." He wasn't wrong. Her supplies were running low, and the nearest town was 40 miles through mountain wilderness. She'd been planning to make a supply run soon, but now that option was gone. They'd starve her out if they had to. The photographs on the mantel caught her eye, the family who'd lived here before, smiling in happier times before whatever darkness had driven them away, or killed them. Maya had found things in this cabin that suggested its previous occupants hadn't left willingly. Bloodstains scrubbed, but not entirely erased. Bullet holes concealed behind strategically placed furniture. If the previous residents had been prepared for a siege, they might have prepared an escape route too. Maya had explored every inch of the main cabin, but she'd barely examined the root cellar beneath the kitchen floor. The wooden door was warped and stuck, seemingly unused for years. But years of neglect might be the perfect cover for a desperate escape. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind still howled through the gaps in the cabin walls like a living thing seeking entry. Maya pressed her back against the cold wood, clutching the shotgun with trembling hands. Through the frost-covered window, she could see movement in the tree line, shadows that didn't belong to swaying branches. They'd found her. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her terror. 7 months along, and already this child had endured more chaos than most people faced in a lifetime. Maya placed one protective hand over her belly while keeping the other firm on the weapon's grip. "I know you're in there, sweetheart." Tommy's voice carried across the clearing, deceptively casual. "Come on out, and we can talk about this like civilized people." Maya almost laughed at that. Tommy Reeves had never been civilized a day in his life. The Hell Angel's enforcer had earned his reputation with brass knuckles and a tire iron, leaving broken bones and shattered lives in his wake. She'd witnessed enough of his handiwork to know exactly what kind of conversation he had in mind. "You took something that doesn't belong to you," he continued, his voice closer now. "Club's willing to be reasonable if you hand it over." The ledger. Maya's eyes flicked to the loose floorboard where she'd hidden Sheriff Kowalski's evidence alongside her own insurance policy. Pages documenting every drug deal, every protection racket, every murder the club had committed over the past 5 years. Information that could destroy them all, including herself. She'd stolen it the night she fled, grabbing anything that might keep her alive if they came hunting. Now it felt like a death sentence wrapped in false hope. The cabin's front door exploded inward with a thunderous crack. Tommy filled the doorframe, his bulk blocking most of the pale daylight. Behind him, she could make out at least 2 other figures, Razor and probably Jake Martinez, both men she'd once considered brothers. "There's my girl." Tommy's smile revealed teeth stained yellow from years of cigarettes and methamphetamine. "Looking a little rounder than when you left us. Stay back." Maya raised the shotgun, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'll shoot." "Now, Maya, we both know you're not going to do that. You're carrying precious cargo there. One loud bang and who knows what might happen to the little one." His eyes glittered with malicious intelligence. "Besides, you always were too soft for the hard choices." That stung because it carried truth. She'd joined the Hell Angels seeking family, belonging, protection from a world that had chewed her up since childhood. Instead, she'd found herself trapped in a different kind of hell, one where violence was currency and loyalty meant looking the other way while monsters committed atrocities. The ledger, Maya. That's all we want. Hand it over and we'll call it even, like you called it even with Sarah Hendricks. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Tommy's expression darkened. Sarah had been another club member's old lady who'd tried to leave, tried to take her young son somewhere safe. They'd found her car wrapped around a tree on Highway 2, both of them dead. The official report called it an accident caused by icy roads, but Maya knew better. She'd overheard Tommy bragging about how easy it was to force someone off the road if you knew what you were doing. Sarah was careless, Tommy said, taking a step forward. Made poor choices. Don't be like Sarah, Maya. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Maya's finger tightened on the trigger, but Tommy was right about one thing, the baby. Any shock could trigger premature labor, and out here, that meant death for both of them. I'm not going back. The words came out stronger than she felt. I'm done with all of it. See, that's where you're wrong. Nobody leaves the family. You know that. You took vows. Through the broken door, Maya caught sight of movement near the woodpile. Razor, circling around to flank her. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to finish this. The vows were bullshit, she said, buying time. Just pretty words to keep us trapped. Tommy laughed, a sound like gravel in a blender. Maybe so, but the consequences are real enough. Maya's mind raced through options, all of them bad. The cabin had a back window, but it was too small to crawl through, especially pregnant. The root cellar was a dead end. Her motorcycle was buried under 3 feet of snow and wouldn't start anyway. Then she remembered something. The journal entries she'd found upstairs, the ones about hidden passages built by bootleggers during Prohibition. The previous owner had mentioned escape routes, places to hide contraband when the law came calling. "Tick-tock, sweetheart," Tommy said, pulling a pistol from his jacket. "Decision time." The floorboards groaned under Sarah's weight as she descended into the cabin's belly, her flashlight cutting through the darkness like a blade. The smell hit her first, earthy, metallic, with an undertone of something she didn't want to identify. Her free hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her mounting dread. The basement was larger than she'd expected, stretching beyond the cabin's footprint. Rough stone walls wept with moisture, and the ceiling hung low enough that she had to duck in places, but it was the far corner that made her blood freeze. Her phone buzzed. "Another text from Marcus, found your trail, coming home, baby." The words sent ice through her veins. Home. As if this place had ever been anything but a temporary refuge. As if she belonged anywhere in his world of blood and loyalty oaths. Sarah climbed back upstairs, her mind racing. The cabin's previous owner hadn't been some innocent hermit. This was a kill site, a place where someone had brought their darkness to flourish in isolation. And now Marcus was tracking her here, following whatever breadcrumbs she'd unknowingly left behind. She moved through the cabin with new eyes, seeing details she'd missed before. Scratches on the doorframe that could have been from restraints. Windows that had been painted black from the inside. A reinforced door she'd assumed led to a storage room, but now realized might have served a far more sinister purpose. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and Sarah pressed her hand against her side. "I know," she whispered. "We need to get out of here." But where could they go? Her truck was nearly empty of gas, and the nearest town was 40 miles through mountain roads she barely knew. Marcus would expect her to run, would have people watching the highways and gas stations. He'd taught her enough about hunting to know she was now the prey. Another text, "Talk to Jenny at the diner. Nice little place. See you soon." Sarah's legs nearly gave out. Jenny, the waitress who'd been kind to her, who'd given her extra coffee and directions to the hardware store. Marcus had found her trail, was following it like a bloodhound, and he was letting her know it, playing with her the way he always had. She forced herself to think tactically. The cabin sat in a defensible position, with clear sight lines down the mountain road. She had Marcus's .45 and enough ammunition for a firefight, though the thought of shooting it out while pregnant made her stomach churn. But maybe she didn't have to. Sarah went back to the basement, this time examining it with different eyes. The previous owner had built this place for dark purposes, but those same features might save her life. The stone walls would stop bullets, and there was only one way down, if she could force Marcus to come to her, control the battlefield. The sound of vehicles on the mountain road cut through her planning, multiple engines growing closer. Sarah killed the flashlight and crept to the front window, peering through a gap in the painted glass. 3 motorcycles wound up the narrow road, their headlights sweeping across the trees like searchlights. Even from a distance, she recognized Marcus's distinctive Harley in the lead, its exhaust note as familiar as his voice. Behind him rode Tommy and Snake, 2 of his most loyal enforcers. Sarah's hand moved to the gun at her waist, 3 against 1, and her 7 months pregnant. The odds were impossibly stacked, but she'd known this moment would come eventually. Marcus would never let her go, never let his child disappear into anonymity. She had maybe 5 minutes before they reached the cabin. 5 minutes to decide whether to fight or surrender, to choose between the monster she'd been running from and the monster who'd lived here before. The baby kicked once more, and Sarah made her choice. She grabbed the rifle she'd found in the closet, checked its action, and positioned herself where she could cover both the front door and the basement entrance. The cabin's previous owner had chosen this location for isolation and control. Now she would use those same advantages. Her phone buzzed one final time. Time to come home, Sarah. Time to remember what family means. Sarah silenced the phone and settled into position, her finger finding the trigger guard. The engines grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls like thunder. The radio crackled to life at 4:47 a.m., jolting Sheriff Barnes from his restless sleep on the station's cot. Deputy Martinez's voice cut through the static, tight with urgency. "Sheriff, we've got a situation. Found Tommy Reichert's body about 2 miles from the Hendricks place. Single gunshot to the chest." Barnes sat up, his joints protesting. He'd been expecting this call, dreading it. "Any sign of the girl?" "Negative. But there's blood leading away from the scene. Not much, but enough to follow. I'm on my way. Don't touch anything else." Barnes pulled on his boots, his mind racing. 3 bodies now, not counting whatever had happened to old Hendricks himself. The pregnant biker girl was either the unluckiest person in Montana or something else entirely. His gut told him it was the latter. 20 minutes later, he stood over Tommy's corpse, studying the scene in the harsh beam of his flashlight. The kid lay sprawled beside his motorcycle, keys still clutched in his dead hand. Professional work, Barnes thought. Center mass, close range. Whoever pulled the trigger knew what they were doing. "Trail goes northeast," Martinez reported, kneeling beside a dark stain on the pine needles. "Toward the old logging road. Get forensics out here when the sun comes up," he ordered. "I want to follow this trail while it's fresh." They moved through the forest in single file, their flashlight beams dancing across the shadows. The blood drops appeared at regular intervals, leading them deeper into the wilderness. Barnes had hunted these woods for 30 years, and he knew they were being led away from civilization toward the abandoned mining claims that honeycombed the mountainside. After an hour of careful tracking, Martinez held up his hand. "Sheriff, look at this!" Ahead, the beam of his flashlight illuminated a cluster of old buildings, their wooden walls grey with age and neglect. The mining camp had been abandoned since the 70s, but smoke curled from the chimney of the largest structure. Barnes drew his weapon, motioning for Martinez to circle around back. As he approached the front of the building, he could hear voices inside. One was definitely female, but the other made his blood run cold. He recognized that gravelly tone from a dozen crime scenes over the years. Marcus Razor Kowalski. The Hells Angels enforcer had been off their radar for months, but Barnes had never forgotten the man's face or his reputation for making problems disappear permanently. Through a gap in the boarded windows, Barnes could see into the main room. The pregnant girl sat tied to a chair, her face pale but defiant. Razor paced in front of her, a pistol hanging loose in his right hand. "You really thought you could just walk away," Razor was saying. "Take what belongs to the club and disappear into the woods like some kind of mountain woman?" The girl's voice was steady despite her situation. "I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. That baby you're carrying says different. Victor's kid belongs with the angels, not hiding in some cabin with his junkie whore mother." Barnes felt the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't about the cabin or its previous occupants. This was about family, about control, about the kind of toxic loyalty that turned brotherhood into bondage. "Victor's dead," the girl said quietly. "Overdose 3 months ago. The baby's all I have left of him. And that's exactly why you're coming back with me." Razor raised the pistol, pointing it at her swollen belly. One way or another, Barnes made his decision. He kicked in the door, weapon drawn. "Montana Sheriff's Department, drop your weapon." Razor spun toward him, but the girl was faster. Somehow she'd worked one hand free from her restraints, and the knife that appeared in her palm moved with practiced precision. The blade caught Razor just below his ribs, angling upward toward his heart. The enforcer stumbled backward, his shot going wide. Barnes put 2 rounds center mass, dropping him before he could recover. "Ma'am, I need you to drop the weapon," Barnes said gently. She looked up at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him understand. This woman wasn't a victim who'd gotten lucky. She was a survivor who'd learned to be dangerous, someone who'd been preparing for this moment long before she'd ever found that cabin. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said, letting the knife fall to the floor. "And I think we need to talk." Martinez appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn, taking in the scene. Barnes holstered his gun and reached for his radio. They were going to need more than forensics this time. They were going to need answers. The helicopter's blades cut through the morning air like a mechanical scythe, and Maya pressed herself deeper into the tree line as it circled overhead. Her breath came in sharp puffs, the cold mountain air burning her lungs as she clutched the rifle against her chest. The aircraft made 3 slow passes before disappearing beyond the ridge, but she knew it would be back. Marcus had found her. She waited 20 minutes before moving, every shadow potentially concealing one of his men. The cabin sat in the distance like a broken promise, its windows dark and lifeless. Everything she'd tried to build there, every fragile hope she'd nursed, felt as distant as another lifetime. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her distress, and Maya placed a protective hand over her swollen belly. "I know, little one," she whispered. "Mama's going to figure this out." The satellite phone in her jacket buzzed with an incoming message. Against her better judgment, she pulled it out and read the text from an unknown number, the old mining road. 1 hour. Come alone or the kid dies. Maya's blood turned to ice. There was only one kid Marcus could mean. Tommy, the 16-year-old prospect who'd been hanging around the clubhouse when she left. Sweet, naive Tommy who reminded her of her younger brother. Marcus knew exactly which buttons to push. She typed back quickly, "What kid? I don't know what you're talking about." The response came immediately, along with a photo that made her stomach lurch. Tommy, bound and bloodied, terror stark in his young eyes. "Stop playing games, Maya. You know what I want." The documents. The evidence she'd gathered about Marcus's drug operations, his connections to the cartel, the murders he'd ordered. Everything that could bring down not just him, but half the chapter. She'd hidden them well, but Marcus had always been persistent. Maya studied the terrain, her mind racing through possibilities. The old mining road was a death trap, a narrow dirt track carved into the mountainside with nowhere to run if things went sideways. But if she didn't show, Tommy would die, and she'd carry that weight forever. She began moving through the forest, using game trails and keeping to the thick undergrowth. Every step was calculated, every sound analyzed. The rifle felt heavy in her hands, but its weight was comforting. She'd been in worse situations and survived, but never while 7 months pregnant. The mining road came into view after 40 minutes of careful stalking. A black SUV sat idling at the widest point, exhaust visible in the cold air. Maya counted at least 3 figures inside, but the tinted windows made it impossible to identify them. She settled into a position behind a fallen log, the rifle's scope giving her a clear view of the vehicle. Her phone buzzed again. "I see you up there, sweetheart. Come down nice and slow, hands where I can see them." Maya cursed under her breath. Either Marcus had thermal imaging or she'd been sloppier than she thought. She typed back, "Show me the kid first." The SUV's rear door opened, and Tommy was dragged out, stumbling on unsteady legs. Even from a distance, Maya could see the bruises on his face, the way he favored his left side. Rage burned in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. Marcus emerged from the passenger seat, his leather jacket pristine despite the wilderness setting. He'd always been vain about his appearance, even when ordering executions. He gestured impatiently toward her hiding spot. Maya made her decision. She slung the rifle over her shoulder and began the treacherous descent, loose rocks skittering ahead of her boots. Each step brought her closer to danger, but also closer to saving an innocent life. "That's my girl," Marcus called out when she reached the road. "Always had a soft spot for strays." "Let him go," Maya said, stopping 20 feet away. "This is between us." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. "You think you can just walk away from the club? From me? After everything I did for you?" "What you did for me?" Maya's voice rose despite her efforts to stay controlled. "You mean the beatings, the forced runs, the constant threats? I made you strong. I made you family." Marcus's eyes glittered with something that might have been genuine hurt. "And you repay me by stealing from us? By threatening everything we've built?" "I never stole anything. Those documents are insurance." "Insurance against what? Against loyalty? Against blood?" Tommy whimpered, and Maya saw fresh blood on his shirt. Her finger found the rifle's trigger guard, muscle memory taking over. The baby shifted again, a reminder of what she was fighting for. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, pulling a pistol from his jacket. "You're going to tell me where those files are hidden. Then you're coming home with us. The kid lives, the baby gets born, and we forget this little adventure ever happened." Maya met his eyes, seeing the lie there as clearly as mountain snow. The radio crackled to life just as Maya finished checking the locks on all the windows. Static filled the cabin before a familiar voice cut through, deep, gravelly, unmistakably Rex. "Maya, darling, I know you're listening." Her blood turned to ice. She'd hidden the radio well, but apparently not well enough from her own paranoia. Rex's voice seemed to seep through the cabin walls like poison gas. "Found something interesting today. A little birdie told me about a pregnant girl asking questions in Whitefish, buying supplies, looking real domestic." His laugh was a razor dragging across glass. "You always were too soft for this life, sweetheart." Maya's hand instinctively moved to her belly. The baby kicked, as if sensing her terror. She reached for the radio with trembling fingers, then stopped. Any response would confirm her location. "See, here's the thing about running from family," Rex continued. "Family always finds you, and when they do, there's a price to pay. Interest, you might say. Sarah says, hello, by the way. You remember the rules, Maya. Nobody leaves the angels, ever. But I'm feeling generous, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to come home, tonight. And maybe your new friend here keeps all her pretty fingers." The transmission ended with a sharp click, leaving Maya alone with the howling wind outside. Her carefully constructed sanctuary felt suddenly fragile, like a house of cards waiting to collapse. She moved to the window, scanning the tree line through the scope of the rifle she'd positioned there earlier. Nothing but shadows and snow-laden branches swaying in the darkness. But Rex was close enough to track her radio frequency, close enough to have taken Sarah. Maya forced herself to think strategically. Rex wasn't just making threats, he was playing psychological warfare. He knew her soft spots, knew she couldn't live with innocent blood on her hands. It's why she'd run in the first place. The floorboard creaked behind her. Maya spun, rifle raised, but found only empty air. The cabin's old bones were settling, nothing more. Her nerves were fraying, exactly what Rex wanted. She moved to her emergency pack, double-checking the contents. Cash, fake ID, ammunition, medical supplies, everything she needed to disappear again. But running meant abandoning the one place that had felt like home, and it meant Sarah would die. Another sound, definitely not the house settling. Footsteps crunching through snow outside. Maya killed the lights and moved to the back window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 3 figures emerged from the forest, moving with military precision. Rex had brought backup. Maya's mind raced through her options. The cabin had 2 exits and a root cellar that connected to an old mining tunnel. She'd explored it weeks ago, mapping every passage. It was her ace in the hole. The front door's handle turned slowly. Maya was already moving, grabbing her pack and the radio. She slipped into the kitchen as the door opened with a barely audible creak. Heavy boots entered, followed by whispered voices. "Check upstairs. I'll take the back rooms." Maya recognized the voice. Tommy Briggs, Rex's lieutenant, a man who'd once helped her change a tire and now would probably torture her without blinking. She reached the cellar door as footsteps thundered overhead. The hinges protested with a soft groan as she descended into the musty darkness below. Behind her, she heard Tommy curse as he discovered the cooling embers in the fireplace. "She's here somewhere, still warm." Maya navigated the tunnel by feel, her hands trailing along the rough-hewn walls. The passage stretched for nearly a quarter mile before emerging near the old mine entrance. She'd cached supplies there, another vehicle, more weapons, enough to either fight or run. But as she moved through the suffocating darkness, Sarah's scream echoed in her memory. Rex was counting on Maya's conscience, on the part of her that couldn't walk away from innocent suffering. He'd always known her better than she'd like to admit. The tunnel seemed endless, each step taking her further from the life she'd tried to build. Her back ached, her breath came in short gasps, and the baby pressed heavily against her ribs. She couldn't keep running forever. Eventually, she'd have to make a stand. Behind her, distant shouts indicated they'd found the cellar. Flashlight beams would be cutting through the darkness soon. Maya quickened her pace, feeling for the markers she'd left along the tunnel wall. When she finally reached the mine entrance, cold air hit her face like a slap. The SUV was there, keys hidden in the wheel well exactly where she'd left them. Freedom was 30 seconds away. But as Maya stood in the threshold between the tunnel and the night, she made a choice that surprised even her. She turned around. The satellite phone's static crackled through the cabin like breaking bones. Maya pressed it against her ear, her other hand instinctively moving to her belly as contractions rippled through her abdomen with increasing frequency. "This is emergency dispatch. Please state your location." I'm in the mountains, Montana. About 40 miles northeast of Glacier National Park." Her voice caught as another wave of pain seized her. "There's a cabin. I think someone's trying to kill me. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you give me any landmarks, road markers?" Maya looked through the grimy window at the encroaching darkness. The snow had started again, fat flakes that would soon erase any tracks leading to this place. "There's an old logging road, mile marker. God, I can't remember. There's a burned-out truck about 2 miles south. We're going to try to locate you. Are you injured?" "I'm pregnant. The baby's coming." She doubled over as another contraction hit, stronger than the last. "And there are people hunting me. They killed someone. They're going to kill me too." The line went quiet except for static. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. Had she lost the connection? "Ma'am? Ma'am, are you there?" "I'm here. Help is on the way, but with the weather conditions, it may take several hours. Is there somewhere secure you can wait?" Maya's eyes swept the cabin's single room. The door she'd barricaded with furniture. Windows she could barely see through. The corpse of Detective Hartwell still sprawled near the fireplace, his blood now a dark stain on the wooden floor. "I don't know. Maybe. Stay on the line with me. What's your name?" "Maya." She hesitated. Giving her last name would connect her to the Hell Angels, to the warrant, to everything she was running from. But what did it matter now? Maya Voss. Another pause, longer this time. When the dispatcher's voice returned, it carried a different tone. Professional distance replacing warmth. Maya, I need you to remain calm. There are people looking for you. Ice flooded her veins. What kind of people? Federal agents. There's a warrant. No. The word tore from her throat. No, you don't understand. They're dirty. Some of them are working with the cartel. They killed Hartwell. They'll kill me and my baby. Ma'am, I need you to... A sound outside made Maya freeze. Engines. Multiple vehicles grinding up the mountain road through the snow. She crawled to the window and peered through a gap in the board she'd nailed across it. Headlights swept through the trees. 3 vehicles, moving slow but steady up the treacherous path. Even through the falling snow, she could see the distinctive outline of federal SUVs. They're here, she whispered into the phone. Maya, what's happening? The agents. They found me. Her breath fogged the glass as she watched the convoy approach. How did they find me so fast? You told them, she said, her voice flat. You told them where I was. Ma'am, please, if you surrender peacefully. Maya ended the call and hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered, pieces scattering across the floor among Detective Hartwell's personal effects and the scattered remnants of her desperate search for answers. Another contraction seized her, this one so powerful it drove her to her knees. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not, whether she was safe or not. The engines grew louder, doors slammed, voices carried through the thin mountain air, professional and coordinated. They were surrounding the cabin. Maya crawled to her backpack and pulled out the .38 she'd taken from Hartwell's body. 6 bullets. Against how many agents? And even if some of them were clean, how could she tell which ones? How could she surrender when she didn't know who to trust? A loudspeaker crackled to life outside. Maya Voss, this is Agent Coleman with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We know you're in there. Come out with your hands visible and no one needs to get hurt. Coleman. The name meant nothing to her, but that didn't matter. Reeves had proven that even agents she thought she could trust were compromised. We know about Detective Hartwell, the voice continued. We know about the cartel money. We just want to talk. Maya pressed her back against the wall beside the door, the gun heavy in her trembling hands. They were lying. They had to be. If they just wanted to talk, why surround her like this? Why track her emergency call? Another contraction built, threatening to overwhelm her. She bit down hard on her lip, tasting blood, forcing herself to stay focused. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing the danger they were both in. Hang on, she whispered to her unborn child. Just hang on a little longer. Outside, she heard footsteps crunching through snow, moving closer to the cabin. Thought you were real clever, didn't you? Jake's voice carried that familiar edge that had terrorized her for months, running off like some scared rabbit, making us all look like fools. Behind him, she could make out 2 more figures, Tommy and Razor, their leather cuts gleaming in the dim light filtering through the broken windows. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she calculated distances, angles, possibilities. The back door was maybe 15 feet away, but she'd have to turn her back on them to reach it. The club doesn't forget, Maya. You know that. Jake stepped into the cabin, his boots echoing against the warped wood. But Snake, he's feeling generous. Says if you come back now, apologize real nice, maybe he won't make an example of you. And the baby? The words escaped before she could stop them. The rage that flared in her chest was white-hot and familiar. For a moment, she wasn't the frightened woman who'd fled in the night. She was the Maya who'd earned her place among the Hell's Angels through violence and cunning. The Maya who'd put 3 men in the hospital before she was 20. Club property? She shifted her stance, muscle memory taking over. I earned my place same as any of you. You earned it on your back, sweetheart. Don't confuse the two. Tommy snickered from behind Jake, and Maya felt something cold and deadly settle over her. She'd killed before, The first time in self-defense, but the others had been choices, bad choices that haunted her dreams and drove her to this God-forsaken cabin in the first place. Where's the money, Maya? Jake's patience was wearing thin. We know you took it from Snake's safe. 23 grand doesn't just disappear. She almost laughed. $23,000, her nest egg, her ticket to freedom, lost to a creek bed when she'd crashed her bike 50 miles south. They'd never believe her if she told them. Hell, she barely believed it herself. It's gone, she said simply. Jake's face darkened. Wrong answer. He lunged forward, faster than his bulk suggested possible. Maya squeezed the trigger twice, the gunshots deafening in the confined space. The first bullet caught Jake in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The second shattered a window behind him. Tommy was already moving, drawing his own weapon as he rolled behind the overturned table. Razor disappeared back through the front door, circling around to cut off her escape. Maya dove behind the kitchen counter as bullets splintered the wood above her head. Pain lanced through her abdomen, not from the gunfire but something else. Something that made her breath catch and her vision blur at the edges. The baby. Too early, way too early. You always were too smart for your own good. Jake's voice was strained with pain and fury. Should have just taken your beating like a good little... His words were cut off by another gunshot, this one from outside, then screaming. Maya risked a glance over the counter and saw Jake's confused expression mirror her own. The front door exploded inward as Razor's body crashed through it, blood spreading across his chest. Behind him stepped a figure Maya recognized but couldn't quite believe, Detective Sarah Chen, her service weapon drawn and steady. Montana State Police, drop your weapons. Tommy's response was immediate, swinging his pistol toward this new threat. Chen was faster, her first shot dropping him before he could fire. Jake, wounded and outgunned, threw his hands up in surrender. Maya Delacroix, Chen called out, a weapon still trained on Jake. I know you're in here. We need to talk. Maya remained crouched behind the counter, her mind racing. Chen had been hunting her for months, trying to flip her as an informant against the club. How had she found this place? How had she known? Another wave of pain doubled her over, and she felt something warm and wet between her legs. Not blood, something else, her water breaking weeks before it should. I need a hospital, she gasped, her voice barely audible. Chen's expression shifted from professional detachment to genuine concern. Maya, I'm coming over there, don't shoot. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air, and Maya realized her desperate gamble for a new life had led her right back into the hands of the law she'd spent years evading. The morning sun cast long shadows through the cabin windows as Maya packed the last of her belongings into the duffel bag. Her hands moved methodically, but her mind raced with everything that had transpired over the past weeks. The cabin that had once seemed like a sanctuary now felt heavy with the weight of secrets and bloodshed. She paused at the kitchen table where Danny's laptop still sat open, displaying the final entries of his journal. The truth about the missing family, about what he'd done in this very room, would haunt her forever. But she'd made her choice. Some secrets were better left buried in the Montana wilderness. The sound of gravel crunching outside made her freeze. Through the window, she saw Sheriff Kowalski's patrol car pulling into the clearing, followed by a black SUV she didn't recognize. Maya's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where her daughter had been growing stronger each day. Federal marshals, she whispered to herself, recognizing the government plates. The Hells Angels investigation had finally caught up to her. Maya grabbed her bag and headed for the back door, but stopped when she heard Kowalski's voice calling out. Maya, I know you're in there. We need to talk. She could run. The forest was thick, and she knew these woods better than anyone now, but running would mean a life of constantly looking over her shoulder, and her daughter deserved better than that. Taking a deep breath, Maya opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Kowalski stood beside his car, his expression unreadable. Two federal agents flanked him, their hands resting casually on their weapons. Sheriff, Maya said, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. "Maya Thompson," one of the agents called out, stepping forward. "I'm Agent Martinez with the U.S. Marshals Service. We'd like to ask you some questions about your association with the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club." Maya descended the porch steps slowly, her hands visible. "I figured you'd find me eventually." "We've been tracking several members of your chapter," Martinez continued. "There's been some serious criminal activity. Weapons trafficking, drug distribution, money laundering. I left all that behind," Maya said firmly. "I came here to start over." Kowalski stepped forward, his weathered face showing concern rather than hostility. "Maya, they're offering you a deal. Full immunity in exchange for your testimony against the club leadership." The irony wasn't lost on her. After everything she'd been through, after the violence she'd witnessed and perpetrated in this very clearing, the government wanted her help to take down the people she'd been running from all along. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Agent Martinez's expression hardened. "Then we arrest you on conspiracy charges. Your daughter grows up visiting you in federal prison." Maya felt a flutter of movement in her belly, as if her child was responding to the tension. She thought about Jake, about the club, about the cycle of violence that had consumed so much of her life. Then she thought about the family that had died in this cabin, about Danny's descent into madness, about all the innocent people caught in the crossfire of other people's choices. "There's something else you need to know," Maya said quietly. "About this place, about what happened here." Kowalski frowned. "What do you mean?" Maya told them everything. About finding the bodies, about Danny's journal, about the confrontation that had ended with his death. She watched their faces change as the full scope of the horror became clear. When she finished, Agent Martinez was scribbling notes furiously. "Where are the bodies now?" "Buried," Maya said simply. "All of them." The clearing fell silent, except for the whisper of wind through the pines. Maya could see the agents processing what she'd told them, weighing the implications. "Jesus Christ," Kowalski muttered, running a hand through his grey hair. "All this time, the Hendersons, we thought they'd just moved away. So what happens now?" Maya asked. Martinez closed his notebook and looked at her with something that might have been respect. "Now we recover the bodies and get closure for those families. And you help us put the angels away for good." Maya nodded slowly. "I want witness protection, new identity, relocation, the whole package. For me and my daughter." "That can be arranged," Martinez said. "But first, we need to process this scene." As the agents began making phone calls and preparing for the investigation team to arrive, Maya walked to the edge of the clearing. The forest stretched endlessly before her, green and wild and free. Somewhere out there was a new life waiting for her and her daughter. Behind her, the cabin stood silent in the morning light, ready to give up its secrets at last. Maya didn't look back as she walked toward the patrol car and the uncertain but hopeful future that waited beyond these mountains.